Success doesn't collapse overnight. It erodes slowly, quietly. While you're busy looking for the big threats, the dramatic disasters, the obvious enemies, something far more dangerous is working against you. It's working right now, in fact, and most people never see it coming until the damage is already done. The truth about failure is this: it's not usually caused by what we see. It's caused by what we overlook, the small things, the daily choices that seem too insignificant to matter, the little neglects that appear harmless in the moment but compound into catastrophe over time. Success has enemies, real enemies, but they don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with warning signs and flashing lights. They slip into your life disguised as harmless habits, comfortable routines, and reasonable excuses. These are the silent killers of personal success. And the most dangerous thing about them is that they operate with your full permission. You invite them in, you feed them, you let them grow strong enough to destroy everything you've worked for. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize they're under attack until it's too late to recover easily. The first of these silent killers is so ordinary, so commonplace, that it seems harmless. It's called neglect. Simple, everyday neglect. Not the dramatic kind where someone abandons their responsibilities overnight. No, this is the subtle kind. The kind where you skip one day at the gym and it turns into 1 week. The kind where you put off that important phone call until tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes next month. The kind where you think about reading that book, starting that project, having that conversation, and then you just don't. Neglect is easy. That's the problem. It's easy to skip. It's easy to delay. It's easy to tell yourself that missing 1 day doesn't matter, that you'll make up for it later, that there's always tomorrow. And that's the trap right there, because neglect doesn't feel like neglect when you're doing it. It feels like nothing. It feels like a tiny decision that carries no weight, no consequence, no real meaning. But here's what I've learned after all these years. It's the little things that matter most. Not the big dramatic gestures, not the New Year's resolutions that last 3 weeks. It's the small, consistent actions repeated daily that build an extraordinary life. And when you neglect those small actions, when you convince yourself they don't matter, you're not just losing a day. You're setting a pattern. You're establishing a philosophy. You're teaching yourself that your word to yourself doesn't mean anything. Think about your health for a moment. Nobody wakes up one morning 50 pounds overweight. That didn't happen overnight. It happened one neglected meal plan at a time, one skipped workout at a time, one dessert that turned into a habit at a time. Each individual decision seems so small, so inconsequential. What's one donut? What's one missed jog? What's one night staying up late instead of getting proper rest? Taken individually, these choices appear meaningless. But life doesn't work in isolated moments. Life compounds. Every choice you make is either building the person you want to become or tearing down the person you could have been. The same principle applies to your finances. I've watched people earn good money, decent money, money that could have set them up for a comfortable life, and end up broke. Not because of some terrible investment, not because someone stole from them, but because of neglect. They neglected to save 10%. They neglected to track their spending. They neglected to learn about money. Small amounts leaked out daily, weekly, monthly, and nobody paid attention because each leak seemed too small to matter. 20 years later, they're working jobs they hate because they can't afford to retire. That's not bad luck. That's neglect compounded over time. Relationships fall apart the same way, not usually because of one big fight or one unforgivable mistake. They deteriorate through neglect. You neglect to say, "I love you" enough. You neglect to listen when your partner talks about their day. You neglect to show appreciation. You neglect to protect the relationship from the slow erosion of taking each other for granted. Each neglected moment seems survivable. The relationship doesn't end on Tuesday because you were too tired to have a real conversation. But neglect accumulates. It builds distance. It creates gaps. And one day you wake up next to a stranger, wondering what happened, when the truth is that nothing happened. That's exactly the problem. Nothing happened when something should have. Your mind and your personal development work the same way. Nobody decides to stop growing. They just neglect to keep learning. They neglect to read. They neglect to attend seminars. They neglect to associate with people who challenge them to think bigger. They tell themselves they're too busy, too tired, that they'll get to it later. Meanwhile, their mind becomes stale. Their thinking becomes outdated. Their skills become irrelevant. And they wonder why younger, hungrier people pass them by in their careers. It's not age. It's neglect. The philosophy here is simple but profound. Everything matters. The small stuff matters. The daily disciplines matter. The things you think you can skip without consequence, those especially matter. Because life is built one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. When you neglect the fundamentals, when you skip the basics, when you convince yourself that this one time doesn't count, you're not just affecting today, you're programming your future. And here's the really insidious part about neglect. It's comfortable. Neglect doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't require effort. It doesn't challenge you. It's the path of least resistance, and human beings naturally gravitate toward ease. We choose the comfortable over the beneficial. We choose the familiar over the profitable. We choose what feels good now over what would be best for our future. But comfort and growth live in different neighborhoods. They don't hang out together. You can have a comfortable life or you can have an extraordinary life, but you probably can't have both, at least not at the same time. Growth requires discomfort. Development requires discipline. Success requires doing what's right instead of what's easy, and doing it consistently, even when you don't feel like it, even when nobody's watching, even when the immediate payoff isn't obvious. That's where neglect gets you. It whispers that one day doesn't matter. It suggests that you deserve a break. It tells you that you'll start tomorrow, next Monday, next month, next year. And the years pass. The decades pass. And the life you meant to build remains a blueprint in your mind, while neglect constructs something entirely different in reality. Now, neglect rarely works alone. It needs a partner, an accomplice that helps it survive undetected. And that brings us to the second silent killer, rationalization. This one's particularly dangerous because it doesn't just destroy your success, it makes you feel good about the destruction while it's happening. Rationalization is the art of lying to yourself so convincingly that you believe it. It's the skill of making excuses sound like reasons. It's the ability to explain away your failures, your lack of progress, your broken promises to yourself in ways that protect your ego while sabotaging your future. And most of us have become masters at this deadly skill without even realizing it. Here's how it works. You set a goal. Maybe you want to lose weight, start a business, write a book, learn a new skill. The goal is clear. The desire is real. You mean it when you set it. But then life happens. Things get busy. Obstacles appear. And instead of pushing through, instead of finding a way, you find a reason, not an excuse. Oh no, we don't like that word. We find a reason, a legitimate, logical, completely understandable reason why we couldn't do what we said we'd do. I would have gone to the gym, but work was crazy today. Sounds reasonable, right? I wanted to start that business, but the economy isn't great right now. Make sense? I was going to save money this month, but unexpected expenses came up. Totally understandable. These aren't excuses, these are facts. Real circumstances, legitimate obstacles. But here's the problem. Successful people face the same circumstances. They have crazy days at work, too. They navigate difficult economies. They deal with unexpected expenses. The difference is, they don't use those circumstances as reasons to abandon their goals. They use them as challenges to overcome. They find ways instead of finding reasons why not. I learned something profound years ago. There's a massive difference between reasons and results. You can have reasons or you can have results. You can't have both. Reasons explain why you didn't. Results prove that you did. And the marketplace, life itself, doesn't care about your reasons. It only rewards results. The scary thing about rationalization is how sophisticated it becomes over time. When you're young, your excuses are obvious. The dog ate my homework. Nobody believes that. But as you get older, as you get more educated, as you accumulate more life experience, you get better at rationalization. Your excuses become more complex, more nuanced, more believable. You learn to wrap them in logic and statistics. You learn to support them with external validation. You find other people who agree with your reasons, and their agreement makes you feel justified. Everyone knows starting a business in this economy is risky. Doctors say you shouldn't push yourself too hard at my age. Studies show that most people who try to change fail anyway. See how that works? You've taken your personal failure to act and dressed it up in external authority. You've made your excuse sound like wisdom. You've convinced yourself that quitting is actually the smart choice. I've watched this destroy more dreams than any external obstacle ever could. I've seen people with incredible talent rationalize away their potential. I've seen people with great opportunities talk themselves out of taking action. I've seen people on the verge of breakthrough convince themselves that turning back was the intelligent decision. And the worst part? Rationalization feels good. That's why it's so addictive. When you rationalize, you get to keep your self-image intact. You don't have to face the uncomfortable truth that maybe you're scared, maybe you're lazy, maybe you lack discipline. Instead, you get to believe you're being realistic, practical, responsible. You get to feel smart about giving up. But here's what rationalization really does. It protects you from short-term discomfort while guaranteeing long-term regret. It saves your ego today while bankrupting your future. It makes the present moment easier while making your entire life harder. Think about health again. Someone who's overweight and unhealthy doesn't usually say, "I'm lazy and I lack discipline." That's too painful. Instead, they rationalize. I have slow metabolism. I have big bones. Healthy food is too expensive. I don't have time to exercise. I've tried everything and nothing works. Each of these might have a grain of truth, but they're being used to justify inaction. They're being used to explain away responsibility. They're being used to make permanent what should be temporary. The same thing happens in careers. Someone stuck in a job they hate for 20 years doesn't say, "I'm too afraid to try something different." That sounds weak. Instead, they rationalize. I have bills to pay. The benefits are good. At my age, it's hard to start over. The job market is terrible, at least it's stable. And year after year, they trade their dreams for safety, their potential for comfort, their possibilities for excuses dressed up as wisdom. Relationships suffer from this too. People stay in mediocre or even toxic relationships and rationalize it brilliantly. At least they don't hit me. All relationships have problems. I'm too old to start over. What if I end up alone? The kids need stability. Some of these concerns might be valid, but when they're used to justify accepting less than you deserve, when they're used to avoid the hard work of either improving the relationship or having the courage to leave, they become weapons of self-destruction. What makes rationalization particularly insidious is that it creates a feedback loop. The more you rationalize, the better you get at it. And the better you get at it, the easier it becomes to rationalize bigger and bigger failures. It starts with small things, missing one workout, skipping one day of work on your goals, breaking one small promise to yourself. You rationalize it, and it feels fine. So next time, you rationalize something a little bigger, then bigger still. Before long, you're rationalizing away your entire life. I've seen people rationalize staying in dead-end jobs for decades. I've seen people rationalize never pursuing their passions. I've seen people rationalize settling for mediocrity in every area of their lives. And the tragic thing is, they've convinced themselves they're being smart. They've convinced themselves they're being realistic. They've convinced themselves that their lack of results is somehow evidence of their wisdom rather than proof of their fear. The antidote to rationalization is brutal honesty. Not honesty with other people, honesty with yourself. You have to be willing to look at your life and call things what they really are. That's not a reason, it's an excuse. That's not wisdom, it's fear. That's not being realistic, it's giving up. That's not circumstances preventing you, it's you preventing you. And this requires courage because the truth often hurts. It's painful to admit that you've been lying to yourself. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge that your sophisticated reasons are just elegant excuses. It's difficult to face the fact that if you had really wanted it badly enough, you would have found a way instead of finding reasons why you couldn't. But here's the liberating part. Once you stop rationalizing, once you stop making excuses, once you stop blaming circumstances and start taking responsibility, everything changes. Because if your lack of results is due to circumstances, you're powerless. Circumstances are beyond your control. But if your lack of results is due to your choices, your habits, your level of effort, then you have power. You can change choices. You can build better habits. You can increase your effort. Rationalization steals that power from you. It convinces you that external factors control your destiny. It makes you a victim of circumstances instead of a creator of results. And victims don't succeed. Victims don't build extraordinary lives. Victims sit around explaining why they couldn't, while successful people are out there producing results. So here's the question. What are you rationalizing right now? What area of your life have you wrapped in sophisticated excuses? What dream have you talked yourself out of pursuing? What goal have you explained away? What change have you avoided by convincing yourself it's not the right time, not the right circumstances, not the right moment? Because until you stop rationalizing, until you stop justifying your lack of progress with clever reasons, nothing changes. You might feel better about your situation, but the situation itself remains exactly the same. And days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and your life becomes a monument to all the reasonable-sounding explanations for why you never became who you were capable of becoming. That's rationalization, the second silent killer, and it works hand in hand with the first, because neglect is much easier to continue when you can rationalize it away. When neglect and rationalization team up long enough, they create the perfect environment for the third silent killer to thrive. This one's particularly heartbreaking because it affects people who have genuine potential, real talent, actual capability. It's called settling, just plain settling for less than you're capable of achieving. Settling doesn't announce itself. Nobody wakes up one morning and declares, "Today I'm going to settle for mediocrity for the rest of my life." It doesn't work that way. Settling is a slow surrender. It's a gradual acceptance of good enough when you were built for greatness. It's the quiet resignation that happens when you stop believing bigger things are possible for you. And here's what most people don't understand about settling. It's comfortable. That's why it's so dangerous. Settling isn't painful. It's actually quite pleasant in the short term. It requires no risk. It demands no courage. It involves no uncomfortable growth. Settling lets you stay exactly where you are, doing exactly what you've always done, being exactly who you've always been. And for many people, that familiarity feels like safety. But there's a massive difference between being comfortable and being fulfilled. Comfort is about ease. Fulfillment is about meaning. Comfort asks, "Does this feel good right now?" Fulfillment asks, "Is this building the life I truly want?" And most people choose comfort over fulfillment every single time because comfort is available immediately while fulfillment requires patience and persistence. I've watched talented people settle for careers they hate because the paycheck was regular. I've seen intelligent people settle for relationships that made them miserable because being alone seemed scarier. I've observed creative people settle for lives of quiet desperation because the alternative required too much change, too much effort, too much risk. The thing about settling is that it happens in layers. First, you settle in one area. Maybe it's your career. You take a job that pays the bills but doesn't excite you. You tell yourself it's temporary. You convince yourself you'll do what you really love later. But later never comes because settling is addictive. Once you settle in one area, it becomes easier to settle in others. Then your health starts to slide. You settle for being out of shape because, well, you're busy with that job you settled for. Then your relationships become mediocre. You settle for surface level connections because you don't have the energy for depth when you're spending 40 hours a week doing work you don't care about. Then your personal growth stops. You settle for who you are right now because growth requires energy you no longer have. Before you know it, you've settled your way into a life you never actually wanted. And the worst part, you can't even remember when you made the decision. There was no single moment where you chose mediocrity. It just happened. One small compromise at a time, one lowered expectation at a time, one abandoned dream at a time. But here's the real tragedy of settling. Somewhere deep inside, you know you're capable of more. That knowledge doesn't go away. It sits there, nagging at you, whispering in quiet moments that this isn't all you could be. You see someone else achieving what you once dreamed about, and something stirs in your chest, not quite jealousy, not quite regret, but something painful nonetheless. That's your unrealized potential trying to get your attention. Most people deal with that discomfort by rationalizing their settling. I'm being realistic, they say. Not everyone can be extraordinary. I have responsibilities. Maybe that's just not in the cards for me. See how that works? The second silent killer rushes in to protect the third. Rationalization makes settling feel wise instead of tragic. The truth is, settling isn't about your circumstances. It's about your standards. It's about what you're willing to accept for your life. Some people settle with advantages. Others refuse to settle despite obstacles. The difference isn't what they have, it's what they demand of themselves. What are you settling for right now? What area of your life have you decided is good enough when you know it could be better? Where have you lowered your standards to match your current results instead of raising your results to match your standards? Because settling becomes a lifestyle. It becomes who you are. You become the person who accepts less, who stops trying, who makes peace with mediocrity. And that's a dangerous identity to adopt because it spreads to everything you touch. Now, settling creates the perfect condition for the fourth silent killer to take over. This one might be the most dangerous of all because it can waste decades of your life before you notice. It's called drift. Just drifting through life without clear direction, without specific goals, without intentional purpose. Drift is motion without meaning. It's being busy without being productive. It's having things happen to you instead of making things happen. It's the difference between living your life and having life happen to you. And most people are drifting. Think about a boat on the ocean. If that boat has no captain, no destination, no navigation, where does it go? It drifts. The current takes it. The wind pushes it. The waves toss it around. It might move a great distance, but it's not going anywhere on purpose. That's most people's lives. Lots of activity, lots of movement, but no direction. Drifters don't make decisions. Circumstances make decisions for them. The job that was available becomes their career. The person they happen to date becomes their spouse. The city where they got that first job becomes where they live forever. Nothing is chosen. Everything just happens. And years go by, decades go by, and they wake up one day in a life they never actually decided to build. The scary thing about drift is how normal it looks. Drifters go to work, they pay their bills, they have relationships. From the outside, their lives appear fine, but inside there's this nagging sense that something's missing, that life is passing by, that they're not really living, they're just existing, just going through motions, just marking time until it's over. And drift is so easy. That's why it catches so many people. Drift requires no effort. You don't have to plan. You don't have to decide. You don't have to take responsibility. You just follow the path of least resistance and see where it leads. And it always leads to the same place. Regret? I've met 70-year-old drifters who can't believe their life is almost over. They look back and can't point to any major decisions they made, any clear direction they chose, any specific goals they pursued. It all just happened. They drifted from school to work to retirement and never took control of the journey. They never set the sail. They never chose the destination. They just drifted wherever the current took them. The opposite of drift is intentionality. It's having a plan. It's setting goals. It's making decisions based on where you want to go, not based on what's easiest or most comfortable in the moment. It's being the captain of your ship instead of a passenger hoping it ends up somewhere good. But intentionality requires something most people aren't willing to give: clarity. You have to know what you want. You have to define success for yourself. You have to set specific targets and then aim for them. And that's hard work. That's uncomfortable. That requires thought and planning and commitment. So most people avoid it. They stay vague. They keep their goals fuzzy. They use language like "I want to be happy," or "I want to be successful." without defining what those words mean. And vague goals produce vague results. If you don't know where you're going, how will you know if you're making progress? How will you know which opportunities to say yes to and which to decline? How will you make decisions that move you forward? You won't. You'll just drift. You'll react to whatever comes your way. You'll let circumstances determine your direction. And years from now, you'll wonder why your life doesn't look like what you hoped it would be. Drift works with settling perfectly. When you settle, you accept wherever drift takes you. When you drift, settling becomes inevitable because you're not aiming for anything specific anyway. These two silent killers reinforce each other, creating a life of quiet resignation dressed up as contentment. And all of this, the neglect, the rationalization, the settling, the drift, all of it becomes easier when the fifth silent killer is operating in your life. The fifth silent killer is perhaps the most subtle of all, and it works by convincing you that your life isn't really yours to design. It's called living for the approval of others, and it will destroy your authentic success faster than any external obstacle ever could. This one starts early. As children, we learn to seek approval. We do things to make our parents proud. We behave certain ways to please our teachers. We make choices to fit in with our friends. That's normal development. But somewhere along the way, many people never outgrow it. They spend their entire adult lives trying to win approval from people who don't have to live with the consequences of their choices. They choose careers their parents respect instead of work they love. They pursue degrees that look impressive on paper instead of education that actually excites them. They buy houses to impress neighbors. They drive cars to signal status. They make life decisions based on what will sound good at their high school reunion. They're living someone else's definition of success and calling it their own. And the tragedy is this: you can't build an authentic life while seeking external validation. The two goals conflict at a fundamental level. Authentic success requires you to know yourself, to honor your values, to pursue what matters to you. But approval seeking requires you to conform, to meet external standards, to become what others expect you to be. I've watched brilliant people waste their gifts on careers that didn't fit them because those careers came with titles that impressed other people. I've seen creative souls become miserable in conventional jobs because stable careers sounded responsible to their families. I've observed people stay in relationships that made them unhappy because breaking up would disappoint people or invite judgment. The problem with living for approval is that it's a game you can never win. There will always be someone who disagrees with your choices. There will always be critics. There will always be people who think you should be doing something different. If you make their approval a measuring stick for your decisions, you'll spend your entire life trying to please people who will never be fully pleased. And even if you do win their approval, even if everyone thinks you've made all the right choices, what have you really won? A life built on their preferences instead of yours. Success that meets their definition instead of fulfilling your purpose. Approval from the audience while you're dying inside on stage. Here's what I learned. Other people's opinions of your life are none of your business. They don't pay your bills. They don't live with your regrets. They don't lie awake at night with your unfulfilled dreams. When you're 80 years old looking back, you won't care what they thought. You'll only care whether you had the courage to live the life that was authentically yours. But breaking free from approval seeking is difficult because it requires something most people fear, disappointing others. It requires being willing to let people disagree with your choices. It requires accepting that some people won't understand your path. It requires the courage to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be judged for choosing differently. That's why this fifth silent killer is so effective. It promises safety and conformity. It offers the comfort of fitting in. It lets you avoid conflict and criticism. But it costs you everything that makes life worth living: authenticity, purpose, fulfillment, the satisfaction of building something that's genuinely yours. Now here's where all five silent killers connect. They're all about avoiding discomfort. Neglect avoids the discomfort of discipline. Rationalization avoids the discomfort of accountability. Settling avoids the discomfort of growth. Drift avoids the discomfort of decision-making. Approval seeking avoids the discomfort of standing alone. These killers work together, reinforcing each other, all serving the same master: your desire to stay comfortable. But life has a cruel irony built into it. The very things you do to stay comfortable today create massive discomfort tomorrow. The neglect feels easy now, but creates health crises later. The rationalization protects your ego today but guarantees regret tomorrow. The settling feels safe now but produces emptiness over time. The drift seems effortless today but leads to decades wasted. The approval seeking avoids conflict now but creates a life you don't recognize as yours. So what's the answer? How do you defeat these silent killers? It starts with awareness. You can't fight an enemy you don't see. You have to recognize when you're neglecting important things. You have to catch yourself rationalizing. You have to notice when you're settling or drifting. You have to identify when you're making choices for approval instead of authenticity. Then comes the hard part. You have to choose differently. You have to do the thing you've been neglecting even when you don't feel like it. You have to stop making excuses and start taking responsibility. You have to refuse to settle and demand more of yourself. You have to get intentional about your direction. You have to build a life based on your values, not other people's opinion. And none of this is comfortable. That's the point. Growth isn't comfortable. Change isn't comfortable. Building an extraordinary life requires you to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It requires you to do hard things consistently. It requires you to face truth, take responsibility, make difficult choices, and keep moving forward even when it hurts. But here's what makes it worth it. The alternative is worse. Living with regret is worse than facing discomfort. Wondering what if for the rest of your life is worse than risking failure. Arriving at the end of your life and realizing you never really lived it is worse than the temporary pain of growth. The silent killers are operating in your life right now. The question isn't whether they're there. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to keep letting them destroy your potential one comfortable day at a time? Or are you going to take back control and build the life you're actually capable of living? That choice is yours. It always has been. And it starts today. So there they are, the 5 silent killers: neglect, rationalization, settling, drift, and approval seeking. They're working in your life right now, in some area, to some degree. And the beautiful thing is, now you see them. You can't unsee them. Every time you skip that workout, you'll know it's neglect. Every time you make an excuse, you'll recognize rationalization. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you'll feel the sting of settling. Every time you go through the motions without purpose, you'll sense the drift. Every time you make a choice to please someone else, you'll know you're trading your life for their approval. That awareness changes everything, because once you see the enemy, you can fight it. And the fight is simple, though not easy. Do what's right instead of what's comfortable. Stay disciplined instead of drifting. Take responsibility instead of making excuses. Demand more instead of settling. Build your life instead of living theirs. The person you're capable of becoming is waiting on the other side of these small daily decisions. Start today. Start now. Your life is too valuable to let these silent killers steal another day.